The room went still. She didn't say a word as she slowly unzipped the Navy-issued jacket and lifted the hem of her undershirt. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sterile shadows across the Admiral's office. When the fabric rose high enough to reveal the jagged scars lining her ribs, deep, old, and brutally distinct, not a single breath was drawn. The Admiral's mouth parted slightly as if words were forming, but none came. He had commanded ships through storms and seen war up close. But he had never seen scars like that on a woman so young, scars that didn't come from combat but from something far darker. And yet she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply lowered her shirt, straightened her back and said, "I'm still fit for duty, sir." Welcome to Twilight Tales, where ordinary moments collide with extraordinary truths. If you're new here, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because the story you're about to hear isn't just about courage, it's about secrets hidden beneath uniforms, about pain carried in silence, and about the shocking moment when one woman's truth made a powerful man question everything he thought he knew. It all started aboard the USS Grant, a sleek, state-of-the-art Navy vessel patrolling the Pacific Ocean. Tucked among its 300 crew members was a mechanic few people knew by name. She was quiet, punctual, and always buried in her work. She never caused trouble. Never lingered in the mess hall. Never joined the others during downtime. Most of the crew called her Ghost Girl, not to her face of course. She was barely seen, rarely heard, and never, ever, vulnerable. What they didn't know was that beneath the thick navy blue uniform, beneath the practiced silence and stoic expression, was a story carved into her skin, one she hoped no one would ever uncover. Until one day the ship hit a technical emergency. And what happened next changed everything. Stay with us because in the next section, you'll meet the woman behind the silence, and see how a minor injury would unravel a past far more painful than anyone could have imagined. Her name was Petty Officer First Class Naomi Briggs. She was one of the few female mechanics on the USS Grant, and probably the only one who could rebuild an engine blindfolded. That wasn't a rumor, it was something she'd actually done during a drill when a power failure left the engine room pitch black. She didn't panic. She didn't hesitate. She just got to work. No one really knew where Naomi came from. Her file said she was from Louisiana, raised in foster care, joined the Navy at 18. But the deeper truths weren't in her papers. They were in the way she avoided eye contact, flinched at loud noises, and kept her body covered even in the heat. For months she stayed invisible just how she liked it. Until that morning. The ship's power grid had a failure. Systems flickered. Alarms went off. Naomi rushed into the control bay with her tools slung across her shoulder. She crouched low, inspecting a line of corroded cables, when a loose pipe above her suddenly broke free and slammed into her side. She didn't scream. She didn't even yelp. She just fell forward, gasping, hand clutching her rib. A junior officer called it in. Within minutes, Naomi was in the medical bay, stiff as steel, eyes locked on the ceiling as the medic peeled back her uniform to examine the damage. The bruising was bad, but it was the scars that made the room fall silent. Long, deep, symmetrical. The medic blinked, frozen. Naomi noticed. And that's when she muttered coldly, "Check the ribs." Not the history. But the story didn't end there. Word spread like wildfire. Not about the injury, but about the scars. Whispers grew in the corridors. Speculation followed her like a shadow. Everyone had a theory: domestic abuse, gang violence, prison time. The command officer ordered a private meeting with Naomi. She didn't flinch. She stood in front of his desk, stiff as a board, and said, "Is this about the power failure? Because I've already submitted the repair report." He stared for a long moment before replying, "No, Briggs. It's not." What followed was an order for her to report directly to Admiral Kent. Not tomorrow. Not next week. No. That was when the wall she had built around herself began to crack. Because the last thing Naomi ever wanted was to be noticed. What she didn't know was that the Admiral had already seen the photos. And what he saw in them sent a chill down his spine. In the next section you'll find out what happened when Naomi walked into the Admiral's office, and why a simple injury triggered a storm far bigger than she ever imagined. Admiral Kent wasn't a man who got easily rattled. 30 years in the Navy had made him a master at masking emotions. But when Naomi Briggs entered his office that day, standing at attention with eyes as cold as steel, he found himself speechless for the first time in years. "Petty Officer Briggs reporting as ordered, sir," she said, voice flat, almost defiant. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her face, her posture, the barely concealed tension in her shoulders. She didn't blink. She didn't break. He gestured to the seat. At ease, Briggs. Sit down. She hesitated. I'd rather stand, sir. Suit yourself, he said quietly, then slid a manila folder across the table. Do you know what this is? She didn't look down. No, sir. These are photos from your medical exam. Taken by the ship's medic when you were brought in after the incident in the engine room. Still, Naomi didn't speak. Didn't flinch. She just waited. The scars on your ribs, he continued, his tone tightening, are consistent with something very specific. Something I've only seen twice before in my entire career. He opened the folder and turned the photos toward her. These marks. They're not from an accident. They're precise. Repeated. Systematic. Naomi clenched her jaw. I didn't ask for this meeting, sir. I know you didn't, he said. But I had to. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, the Admiral leaned back and asked, Where did you get those scars, Briggs? Her voice was low. Controlled. Somewhere I don't talk about. I'm not trying to dig into your past out of curiosity, he said. I'm trying to understand who's standing in front of me. Because if what I suspect is true, then you're not just another sailor on this ship. At last she looked him in the eye. You want to know the truth? She asked. You want the real story? He nodded. She stepped forward, slowly unzipped her jacket, and lifted the side of her undershirt. The scars were worse in person, lines that crisscrossed, deep and discolored, faded by time but unmistakable in their origin. 12 years ago, she began, I was one of 13 girls taken by a cult operating out of the Louisiana swamps. No names. No rescue for months. The ones who made it out, we don't talk about it. Not because we forgot, but because remembering breaks something inside. Admiral Kent sat frozen. You were one of the Bayou 13? He whispered. She nodded once. And you're telling me this, because? Because you asked, she said, zipping her jacket. And because if you ever bring it up again, I walk. I've survived worse than dishonorable discharge. What Naomi didn't know, what the Admiral had just realized, was that someone else was looking for the Bayou 13. And they had just found her. Admiral Kent didn't sleep that night. The revelation had unsettled something deep in him. He sat in his quarters long after midnight, staring at the confidential files pulled from Naval Intelligence's restricted archives. Names redacted. Photos blurred. But one thing was clear, Naomi Briggs wasn't just a survivor. She was a ghost from an investigation that had haunted federal agencies for over a decade. The Bayou 13. 13 missing girls. Only 5 recovered. None had spoken publicly. The cult had vanished without a trace. And now one of them was serving on his ship. The next morning, Naomi returned to duty as if nothing had happened. Quiet, composed, and focused. Her peers had no idea what she carried beneath the surface. She kept her sleeves rolled down, her past buried deep. But Kent couldn't unsee it. He reviewed her service record again. Flawless. Medals for valor. Commendations from multiple commanding officers. A reputation for stepping into chaos without blinking. No red flags. No psychological holds. But now he understood why she never sought attention. Why she worked harder than anyone else and trusted no one. And someone else had noticed too. Later that afternoon, an encrypted message arrived at Kent's terminal from a private intelligence contractor. Target identified, Briggs, Naomi. Active. Possible witness. Proceed. His blood ran cold. Someone outside the Navy had eyes on her. Which meant she wasn't safe. That evening, Kent called her back to his office. The tone was different this time, not stern but urgent. Close the door, he said. She obeyed, brows furrowed. We don't have time for pleasantries, he began. Someone knows who you are. Naomi stiffened, the first flicker of fear breaking through. I've received confirmation that your name is flagged in an external intelligence network. This isn't just about your past anymore. You're a liability to someone powerful. I've lived as a ghost for 12 years, she said, eyes narrowing. I can disappear again. No, he replied firmly. Not this time. You're not running. If they're looking for you, it means you're close to something they don't want exposed. Naomi crossed her arms. You're suggesting I let them come? I'm suggesting, he said, locking eyes with her, that we prepare for when they do. She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Fine, she said. But if I'm going to stand and fight, I want access. Full intel. No filters. You'll have it, Kent replied. But there's something you should see first. He pulled out a photo. Old, grainy but unmistakable. This man was identified near the cult's last known compound. He's been off-grid since then. Until 2 months ago when he reappeared, posing as a Navy consultant. Naomi took the photo, eyes narrowing. "I remember him," she whispered. Kent leaned forward. "Then you understand, this isn't over." Naomi stared at the photograph long after the Admiral left her alone in the secure briefing room. The man in the image, gray hair, hollow eyes, a scar running down his cheek, was burned into her memory. He had been the doctor. He never gave them his real name. Just a white coat, a calm voice, and a clipboard. He was the one who injected the girls with calming agents. The one who'd whispered that pain was necessary to erase their former selves. She hadn't seen his face in 12 years. And now he was walking the decks of her ship under a different name. Admiral Kent had already started a quiet internal investigation, but even he knew this operation needed to stay invisible, for Naomi's safety and for the Navy's integrity. If it leaked that a known abuser had infiltrated their ranks as a consultant, the fallout would be catastrophic. Naomi asked for access to restricted surveillance footage. For the first time she wasn't just reacting, she was hunting. The following days blurred into a careful, covert dance. Naomi was still completing her duties, still saluting superiors and maintaining perfect posture, but between every drill and briefing she was tracking movements, cross-referencing logs, and reviewing surveillance from the engineering bay, where the consultant had last been seen. And then it happened. Just after 0200 hours she spotted him. On camera. Alone in a maintenance corridor, tampering with a shipment crate. Naomi enhanced the image. The serial numbers matched a cache flagged by Homeland Security, evidence connected to black market medical testing devices once used in underground psychological operations. He wasn't just hiding. He was still working. The trauma that Naomi had buried for years rose to the surface, not to break her, but to guide her. She remembered the layout of the compound, the coded language, the symbols etched on the wall, and most importantly, the tone in his voice when he thought he was untouchable. She requested a face-to-face. Admiral Kent was hesitant. "Are you sure you can handle this?" She looked him in the eye. "I'm not that little girl anymore." The meeting was scheduled under the guise of a technical debriefing. The consultant, now operating under the alias Dr. Ezra Hartwell, walked into the secure room with fake credentials and a smug, composed smile. Naomi stood at the far end of the room, arms crossed. He didn't recognize her at first. But when she spoke, just a single word in the soft tone he used to force obedience, his face twitched. Recognition. Then fear. Naomi leaned forward. "Do you remember what you carved into our ribs?" she asked. His breath caught. His hand twitched toward his satchel. And just then the Admiral's voice came through the intercom. "We have everything we need." Naomi stepped back. The door burst open. Security swarmed in. Dr. Hartwell didn't go down without resistance, but he was overwhelmed, cuffed, and dragged from the room. Naomi stood there shaking, not from fear but from release. The monster was real. And now he was caged. The ship buzzed with rumors after the arrest. No official statement had been released, but crew members whispered about the late-night takedown, the way Dr. Hartwell was dragged out in restraints, the sudden lockdown of multiple engineering compartments. Naomi kept her head down, but she could feel the shift in the air. No longer invisible, no longer just a quiet, competent officer. Eyes followed her now, some with curiosity, others with silent respect. Admiral Kent summoned her again. This time there were no files, no formalities. Just 2 mugs of coffee and a long, quiet pause. "You were right," he said simply. "About everything." Naomi didn't respond. Her mind was still replaying that final moment in the interrogation room, the way Dr. Hartwell's arrogance melted into panic when she spoke. "I did a deeper dig," the Admiral continued. "Hartwell, or whatever his real name is, has ties to a Black Ops branch that was shut down over a decade ago. But apparently he never stopped experimenting. He just changed his cover and found new institutions to hide behind." Naomi clenched her jaw. "And we hired him. Not knowingly. His record was scrubbed. But thanks to you we've exposed more than just a single man. There's an entire network, hidden contracts, ghost facilities. You're the key to unraveling it." She looked up, startled. "You want me to lead the investigation?" Kent nodded. "You've survived it. You understand it. And now you have a chance to destroy it." For a long moment, Naomi said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached into her uniform and pulled out the dog tag she had worn beneath her clothes since the day she escaped the facility. Not her own, another girl's. The one who didn't make it. She placed it on the table. "For her," she said softly. "And the others." Over the next few weeks, Naomi was granted full access to the recovered files from Hartwell's devices. It was worse than she thought. Documents, video logs, names of young girls recruited or abducted under false pretenses. Many were still missing. Some presumed dead. But a few might still be alive. Naomi traveled back to the mainland under the Navy's protection and quietly began reaching out to the names on the list. Her first meeting was with a woman named Kira, now living under a new identity. The moment they saw each other, they embraced without a word, sisters bound by scars no one else could see. One by one, the truth began to surface. Old secrets, government mistakes, human lives discarded for science, obedience, control. Naomi had been just a child when it happened. Now she was the reckoning. Each day she carried the weight of the past like a second skin. But now, for the first time, she also carried something else. A sense of purpose. A quiet rage. And the knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore. Word of Naomi's work spread far beyond the Navy. Human rights organizations, investigative journalists, and even a few retired military officials reached out quietly, some offering help, others seeking absolution. The truth Naomi had uncovered was no longer confined to the decks of a single ship. It had sparked a silent revolution beneath the surface of the nation's conscience. But with exposure came danger. Late one night, while reviewing a decrypted folder on her Navy-issued laptop, Naomi noticed something odd. A hidden algorithm embedded in a file, a backdoor. Whoever created it had tried to track her. She didn't panic. Instead, she documented everything and reported it directly to Admiral Kent. "This means they know I'm alive," she said. Kent's expression turned grim. "You're a threat now, Lieutenant?" She didn't flinch. "Then let them be afraid." The Navy doubled her protection detail, but Naomi knew, if these people wanted her silenced, they wouldn't come with warnings. So she took precautions, changed hotel rooms nightly, used encrypted drives, and trusted no one outside the small task force Kent had handpicked. Despite the looming threat, Naomi pressed on. In a secured military lab, she uncovered one final piece of damning evidence. A series of video logs from the experimental facility, logs showing test subjects being disciplined for disobedience. Electroshock, sedation, forced surgeries. Her own file was among them, marked Subject 9A. It was chilling. She barely recognized the frightened girl in the footage. Shaved head, trembling, begging. But then came the moment that stopped her heart. A clip where she fought back. Small, malnourished, maybe 12 years old, yet fierce. Screaming, biting, scratching one of the guards. And in the background, a voice, "Restrain her. We don't want another Kira situation." Naomi stared at the screen, her jaw tight. Kira had told her she escaped alone. But that clip, those words, it meant Naomi's resistance had triggered something. Maybe even saved lives. She wasn't just a survivor. She'd been a spark in the dark all along. At the next task force meeting, Naomi stood before the board of Navy officials and presented her findings. It wasn't just a story of personal trauma. It was a web of military negligence, unethical experimentation, and deliberate cover-ups. The room fell silent as she concluded her report with a single slide, the faces of the survivors she had found. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about all of us. And the system that failed us." One admiral stood and saluted her. Then another. And another. Admiral Kent simply nodded, pride and sorrow in his eyes. "You were made to be silent," he said, "but now you speak for all who couldn't." And Naomi realized, her pain had become her power. The fallout came swiftly. Following Naomi's testimony, a classified tribunal was opened. Names once protected by rank and secrecy were brought forward under oath. Files once buried beneath black ink and red tape were now projected on courtroom walls. Naomi watched as faces she had once feared tried to defend the indefensible. They called her memories inaccurate, her scars unverified. But the evidence was too overwhelming. Footage, medical logs, survivor testimonies. For every denial, there was a voice Naomi had helped uncover. And she never missed a hearing. Each day, she sat silently in the gallery, her Navy uniform pressed, her medals gleaming not from pride but from pain refined into honor. When they called her back to the stand for cross-examination, the defense tried to rattle her. "You waited years to speak. Why now?" Naomi didn't blink. "Because I was trained not to feel. But I'm not numb anymore." The final ruling came after 10 days. 6 high-ranking officers were dishonorably discharged. 2 faced criminal indictments. The covert program that had hidden so many crimes was officially dismantled. Victims were offered restitution. The Navy vowed reform. But no verdict could erase the years Naomi and the others had lost. Later that evening, as Naomi stood on the steps of the Pentagon surrounded by press cameras, she didn't speak from a podium. She looked into one camera and said, "For those who carry scars in silence, know this, your story matters. And when you're ready to speak, we'll listen." The clip went viral. Not because she was emotional, but because she was unshakable. Back home, in a quiet ceremony, Naomi was honored by the very branch that once betrayed her. Not just for bravery but for integrity. Admiral Kent stood by her side, publicly acknowledging the Navy's failure to protect its own. "We failed you," he said plainly. "But you rose. You didn't just survive. You led." When the national anthem played, Naomi stood tall, not out of blind loyalty but out of purpose. Her service was no longer defined by what was done to her, but what she had done in return. That night, she visited the hospital wing where Kira now worked as a counselor for other veterans. The two sat together in silence for a long time, until Kira finally whispered, "You freed us." Naomi smiled. "I just told the truth." She returned to her quiet apartment weeks later, decorated only with simple reminders of where she'd been. A framed photo of her old shipmates. A worn-out notebook filled with names she never forgot. And one untouched medal placed on the mantle, not for display but remembrance. The world had changed. And Naomi was no longer invisible. So what do we take from Naomi's story? That strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, surviving, enduring, and choosing to stand when you've been broken. Naomi didn't seek revenge. She didn't shout. She didn't lash out. She simply showed the truth. And when she did, even an admiral, even a system that had silenced her for years, fell silent in the face of her courage. In a world that often ignores the quiet pain of others, Naomi reminded us all, scars aren't signs of weakness. They are the proof that we lived through what tried to destroy us, and we're still here. She didn't need pity. She needed to be seen. And when she was finally seen, not as a statistic, not as a victim, but as a soldier, a leader, and a woman of fierce dignity, the world around her had no choice but to listen. There are many like Naomi walking among us, wounded in silence, fighting private wars, carrying stories that could shake foundations if only someone cared enough to hear them. If you've made it this far in the story, ask yourself, who are we ignoring in our lives because their pain isn't loud? Who have we walked past, doubted, dismissed, when we should have asked one more question or looked 1 second longer? Naomi's story matters not because she exposed powerful people. It matters because she reclaimed the power they thought they stole from her. So next time you meet someone who seems distant or guarded, remember Naomi. Remember the scars beneath the surface. Remember that sometimes all it takes is someone willing to ask, "What happened to you?" instead of judging what they became. This was Twilight Tales, where every shadow hides a story, and every story deserves light. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment telling us, what was your favorite moment from Naomi's journey? You never know who might hear it, and find the strength to speak their own truth. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and keep listening.